What if everything you assumed here was wrong? The best-selling album of all time, over 70 million copies of a single record, a publishing catalog that included literally the Beatles, and one day he died, reportedly somewhere between $400 to $500 million in debt. This statistic gets buried, and here's why. That gap isn't rumor, it's confirmed repeatedly across court fillings spanning 2 decades, and is stranger than the headline version most people have heard. Let's actually follow the money all the way through. By the numbers, most people already know. Thriller, released in 1982, is the best-selling album in history. That alone made him extraordinarily wealthy by his mid-20s. But the single decision that actually built his real fortune wasn't the song at all. This is the part that usually stays behind closed doors. In 1985, he outbid Paul McCartney for a company called ETV Music, publishing the catalog holding the rights to the majority of the Beatles' own songs. The price roughly around $41.5 million. A pop star out negotiating an actual Beatle for the rights to the Beatles' own music sounds almost invented. It happened, and it became a wide margin. The single most important financial decision of his career. A decade later, in 1995, he merged that catalog with Sony's publishing arm to form Sony/ATV, taking a cash payment of roughly $95 million and keeping a 50% stake in the new joint venture. That one asset, not his voice, not his tours, not his records deals, in the one that ends up mattering more than anything else in the story combined. This transformation didn't happen the way people assume, because here's where the story usually gets told wrong. Most retellings jump straight from he was rich to he was broke, like it happened overnight. It didn't. It happened slowly, expensively, one enormous purchase at a time. In 1988, he bought a 2,700 acres property in Santa Barbara country for around $19.5 million and named it Neverland. That number wasn't the problem. What came after was an estimated $35 million more poured into turning that land into a private amusement park, a zoo, a Ferris wheel, a train station, a movie theater, its own fire department. Maintaining all of it reportedly cost somewhere around $5 million a year, whether he was living there or not. Most people underestimate this by a wide margin. Add private jets, arts, jewelry, and a 1993 legal settlement reported around $20 million following allegations that would shadow the rest of his career. And you get a spending pattern that had almost nothing to do with income and everything to do with momentum. A forensic accountant would later testify under oath that in his later years, he was spending $20 to $30 million per year than he was actually earning. This is exactly how people get caught off guard. By the mid-2000s, reported debt had already climbed past $270 million. In 2001, he already used his half of the ATV catalog as collateral to secure $200 million in loans. Sponsors would come lined up to work with him. Pepsi was among them. Quietly disappeared following the 1993 allegations, cutting off a major income stream right as spending kept climbing. A costly 2005 criminal trial on which he was fully acquitted added millions more in legal costs during a period when his earning power had already taken a real hit. This is the conversation everyone avoids having. Here's the detail most version of the story leaves out. By 2007, court filing showed up. He actually held about $567 million in total assets. He wasn't broke on paper, not even close. He had $331 million in debt against that, and less than $700,000 in cash. Asset rich, cash poor, a phrase that sounds abstract until you realize it means being unable to cover your own bills while technically owning $500 million in property. In 2008, he defaulted on the loan against Neverland itself. The ranch was one signature away from foreclosure before an investment firm, Colony Capital, stepped in and took over the debt to prevent it. He never lived there again. What if the answer has been obvious the whole time? And yet, through every one of those years, through the settlements, through the foreclosure threat, he never sold the one asset that actually mattered. His 50% stake in Sony ATV sat there the entire time, still holding a piece of the actual Beatles catalog, still quietly growing while everything around it fell apart. In 2006, under serious debt pressure, he gave Sony an option to buy half of the stake for roughly $250 million rather than selling it outright, protecting the ownership even while drowning in obligations he couldn't otherwise cover. In time, this decision will look either brilliant or costly. That decision protect the asset over almost everything else, even while everything else was collapsing, is the single thread connecting the man who nearly lost Neverland to the estate that would eventually be worth more than anyone predicted. He died in June 2009, still carrying that reported $400 to $500 million range debt. That should have been the end of the story. It wasn't. His estate, run by two executors, John Brannick and John McLean, didn't panic sell what remained. They managed it like the asset it always was, a concept film. This is it. Because one of the highest grossing documentaries ever released, catalog sales surged, and the Sony ATV stake he protected through every crisis of his life kept climbing in value after he was gone. This has doubled, and almost nobody had noticed. In 2016, the estate sold its remaining Sony ATV stake for $700 million. In 2018, it sold its share of another publishing catalog for close to $290 million, and in a deal that closed as recently as 2024 after years of litigation, including a challenge from his own mother who argued it violated the terms of his will. The estate sold roughly half of his remaining music and recording catalog to Sony in a transaction valuing those assets $1.2 billion, with Sony paying at least $600 million for its shares. Here's what insider knows and outsiders don't. A probate court put it about as plainly as court ever puts anything. In its own words, what started as nothing but debt and ongoing obligations has been turned into a $2 billion estate. The man who couldn't cover his own bills in 2007 is on paper worth roughly 4 times what he owed the day he died, and he's been gone for over 15 years. Here's the part that makes you rethink the beginning. So here's the actual lesson sitting underneath all of it, and it's not don't spend money, even though spending is the part everyone remembers. It's this: income and wealth are not the same asset, and confusing them is what nearly cost him everything. His income, the record deals, was genuinely enormous, and it still wasn't enough to outrun the spending. What actually saved the story wasn't more income arriving, it was one piece of ownership he refused to give up, even during the exact years he had every reason to. This will make the next step obvious. The version of this story that ends at his death is a cautionary tale about excess. The version that includes the 15 years after something closer to the most important idea on this channel. What you own outlasts what you earn every single time, if you protect it long enough for that to matter. Drop a comment telling which number actually surprised you the most, the $500 million debt or the $2 billion in asset that came after it. I read every single one. And that's the real lesson here. Earning a real fortune and owning a fortune are two completely different things. You can generate enormous amount of income, build a massive business, and still end up with a very little control over the assets that actually create that wealth. Income can disappear, business can change, deals can end, marketplace can collapse, but asset you generally own can continue producing value long after the income that built them is gone. And when the money stops coming in, what you actually own, not how much you once earned, is what determines whether that wealth survives, grows, or disappears entirely.